I'll never forget the sound of their laughter. It wasn't the kind of soft laughter that comes from joy or the type that bubbles up when a family shares a warm memory. No, it was sharp, cutting, filled with mockery. That sound has stayed with me like a scar that refuses to fade. It all started on a Sunday afternoon, when the family had gathered in Grandpa's living room. The air smelt faintly of coffee and old wood, the kind of scent you only find in a house that's seen decades of living. The sun streamed through the curtains in dusty golden rays, and everyone was chatting, catching up, and telling their little stories. It should have been a warm, ordinary day, but it turned into a moment that would change everything. I remember gripping that piece of paper in my hand, my ticket. It wasn't just paper to me. It was a chance, a spark of hope, something that meant my life could shift, even if just a little. Maybe it was a raffle ticket, maybe it was for a trip, maybe it was for something bigger. The details didn't matter to me in that moment. What mattered was how I held on to it, because it meant possibility. It meant a break from all the disappointments that had piled up like heavy stones in my chest. I wanted to share it. I wanted them to see that maybe, just maybe, this was my turn. My chance at something brighter. So I stood there in front of them all and I said it. I told them about the ticket. My voice cracked a little, but I smiled because I was proud. I wanted them to believe in me, to feel a flicker of excitement too, but instead of support, I heard the first chuckle. Then another, and then it spread like wildfire. The cousins leaned back in their chairs, shaking their heads. My aunt whispered something under her breath, and my uncle let out a snort so loud it made my ears burn. "You," one of them said between laughs. "You really think that ticket means anything? You always dream too big, don't you?" I felt my face heat up, but I tried to stand tall. "It's real," I said. "It's my chance." But that only made them laugh harder. Their voices overlapped, echoing in my head like cruel music. To them, I wasn't someone holding on to hope. I was a joke. The kid who always failed, the one they thought would never amount to anything. And that's when it happened. Grandpa's voice cut through the laughter like thunder slicing through a storm. His words weren't shouted. No, they were calm and steady but filled with weight. Enough weight to silence the entire room in an instant. I'll never forget the way he leaned forward, his old hands folded over his cane, his tired eyes sharp as glass. He looked at them, not at me, but at them, and what he said shattered their laughter into pieces so small it could never be put back together. What did Grandpa say? Well, that's where the story truly begins. When people laugh at you, it hurts. But when your own family laughs, it cuts into you in a way that words can barely describe. Their faces, their voices, those are supposed to be the people who believe in you when the world turns its back. But my family had long ago chosen to see me as nothing more than a disappointment. You see, I wasn't the cousin with the shiny career. I wasn't the one who bought a big house or drove a new car. I was the one who stumbled again and again. The one who tried to start a small business that never made it past the first year. The one who took odd jobs, scraping together enough just to keep the lights on. And no matter how hard I worked, it always seemed like I came up short. Every family gathering became a silent scoreboard. My cousins bragged about their promotions. My uncles compared cars and paychecks. My aunts talked about vacations to places I couldn't even dream of affording. And me? I sat quietly, feeling smaller with every word. I knew the whispers behind my back, the little jokes made when they thought I couldn't hear. Poor thing, always chasing, never catching. So when I got that ticket, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol, a chance to finally step out from the shadow they had built around me. I imagined walking into the next gathering with good news. I imagined their faces, stunned into silence when they realized I wasn't the joke anymore, that I had something of my own. But hope in my family was dangerous. They didn't like dreamers. They liked winners, the kind who already had something to show off. If you dared to hope without proof, they crushed you before the dream could grow. And that's exactly what they tried to do that Sunday afternoon. I stood in Grandpa's living room, holding that ticket like it was my lifeline. The laughter rolled around me, bouncing off the old wallpaper, echoing in my ears. My cousin Michael, the loudest of them all, slapped his knee and said, "Man, if you think you're going to get anywhere with that ticket, then pigs are going to fly today." His words earned another round of chuckles. I forced a smile, though my throat was tight. "Why not me?" I asked. "Why can't it be my turn?" That question made them laugh harder. My aunt shook her head. Because you've never had a turn. You just don't have it in you. Some people are meant to win, and some people. Well, they stay where they are, I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to tell them how many nights I'd stayed awake, working 2 jobs, praying that something would finally change. But the words stuck in my chest, heavy like stones. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for the exact moment I felt small enough to break, Grandpa shifted in his chair. He didn't move fast anymore, not with his age. But when he leaned forward that day, the room went still. Everyone respected Grandpa, even if they didn't always listen. He was the kind of man who didn't waste words, so when he spoke, every syllable carried weight. His old hands tightened around the top of his cane. His eyes, clouded with age yet still piercing, moved slowly around the room. They landed on each family member who had laughed. He didn't look at me. Not yet. He looked at them, and the silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, his voice came, low and steady. You laugh now because you've forgotten what it's like to hope. You've forgotten what it's like to believe in someone before they've made it. But I haven't forgotten. The words were like a bell ringing in a quiet church. They hung in the air, impossible to ignore. And though they were calm, they carried a force that made my cousins shift uncomfortably in their seats. He wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Grandpa's voice was steady, but it carried an edge that none of us had heard in years. He wasn't a man who raised his voice. He didn't need to. Respect followed him like a shadow. Even in his late 70s, with his thinning white hair and the lines etched deep into his face, his presence filled the room. You laugh at him now, Grandpa said, his gaze sweeping over the room like a spotlight. But I remember when some of you sat in the same place he's sitting now. You forgot how it feels, but I haven't. No one spoke. My cousin Michael, who had been the loudest in mocking me, suddenly avoided Grandpa's eyes, pretending to be fascinated by the pattern on the rug. My aunt shifted in her seat, the confidence draining from her smirk. Grandpa tapped his cane lightly on the floor. Thump, thump. Each sound echoed through the silence. I remember when Michael came to me at 21 asking for money because he couldn't pay rent. I gave it to him. No one laughed at him then. Michael's face turned red. His wife looked at him, confused, and then quickly looked away. Grandpa's eyes moved again, landing on my aunt. And you, Ellen, you wanted to start that bakery, remember? You begged me to believe in you. I did. I gave you what I could. No one laughed at you then either. Ellen's lips pressed together, her cheeks pale. Her hands twisted in her lap as the room grew heavier. One by one, Grandpa reminded them. Reminded them of the times they had fallen, the times they had leaned on someone else, and the times they had needed faith before results. His voice didn't rise, but every word was sharp enough to cut through the smugness that had filled the room only moments before. And then, finally, his eyes turned to me. I felt my breath catch. For a moment I thought he would scold me too, remind me of my failures, echo their laughter. But instead, his gaze softened. You hold that ticket like it's hope, he said. And maybe it is. Maybe it's nothing. But I'll tell you this. I'd rather stand with the one who still dares to hope than with those who've grown so cold they can't see possibility anymore. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, but no words came. His defense felt like a shield wrapping around me, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel alone. But if I thought his words would end it, I was wrong. Because silence doesn't always mean surrender. Beneath the stillness of the room, I could feel something else brewing. Resentment, pride wounded, ego bruised, and family, when cornered, can be crueler than strangers. My cousin Michael finally lifted his head, his voice sharp with bitterness. So what, Grandpa? You're saying we're all hypocrites? That we should believe in some worthless piece of paper because he says so? The others nodded faintly, finding courage in his defiance. My aunt crossed her arms. Hope is one thing, but blind faith? That's just foolish. Their laughter had been replaced with something worse, scorn wrapped in self-righteousness. They didn't just want to dismiss me. They wanted to prove that Grandpa's faith in me was misplaced, that his words were weakness, not wisdom. The conflict had shifted. It wasn't me against them anymore. It was Grandpa and me standing together, facing a wall of family pride that refused to crack. And though his words had stilled their laughter, I could feel the storm was only beginning. Michael leaned forward in his chair, his arms resting on his knees, eyes narrowed at Grandpa. "You think you're making some kind of noble point," he said, his voice laced with bitterness. "But all you're doing is setting him up for another failure. That's what you always do. You spoil him with pity and let him believe he's more than what he is." The words landed heavy, like stones hurled across the room. My heart pounded in my chest, but I stayed silent, gripping the ticket tighter in my hand. My Aunt Ellen, emboldened by Michael's outburst, chimed in. "Exactly. We're not being cruel, Dad. We're being realists. He's had plenty of chances. Too many, if you ask me. And every time, it's the same story. He dreams, he fails, and then he expects us to clap for him like children at a school play. Enough is enough." Her words stung worse than laughter. They weren't mocking now. They were slicing me apart with something far colder, contempt. Another cousin scoffed from the corner of the room. "Honestly, I don't even know why you bother coming to these gatherings anymore. You show up with your sad little stories, your next big break, and it never goes anywhere. We're tired of it." "You're tired of it? Just admit it. You'll never be the one who makes it." Their voices stacked on top of each other, a chorus of betrayal. Each word stripped me bare, each sentence pressing down on me until my chest felt like it might collapse. And the worst part, a small part of me believed them. A small, fragile part whispered that maybe they were right. Maybe I was the fool they thought I was. Maybe I was clinging to scraps of hope while the rest of the world had already written me off. I lowered my eyes to the ticket in my hand. It blurred through the tears that threatened to spill. To them, it was nothing but paper. To me, it was a symbol of something bigger, but their voices were crushing that symbol into dust. Grandpa slammed his cane against the floor, the sharp crack silencing the room for a brief moment. His eyes burnt with fury. "Enough," he said, his voice trembling not from weakness but from restrained anger. "You speak as if you've never fallen. You speak as if you've never begged for belief before you had proof. Every one of you has. And yet here you sit, tearing down the one person who dares to dream in front of you. Shame on you." But instead of shame, I saw resentment harden in their faces. They didn't want to be reminded of their own failings. They didn't want their pride pricked or their hypocrisy laid bare. And so they turned their anger not just toward me but toward Grandpa too. "You've always had a soft spot for him," Michael snapped. "You coddle him, and then you expect us to play along with the fantasy. But when he falls again, and he will, who cleans up the mess? Not you. It's us who listen, us who shake our heads, and us who pick up the pieces. We're done playing along." Grandpa's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened against the top of his cane. For a moment I thought he might shout, but instead he just looked at them with a sadness so deep it made the room feel colder. And in that silence, I felt it, the betrayal sink deeper than ever before. It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It wasn't just that they mocked my hope. It was that they wanted me to fail. They needed me to stay small so their own pride could stand tall. I sat there surrounded by my own family, realizing the truth. They weren't just laughing at the ticket. They were laughing at me. They always had been, and that realization hurt more than any stranger's cruelty ever could. But it was also the moment something shifted inside me. Because betrayal, when it cuts deep enough, can either break you, or it can forge you into something stronger. And I was about to find out which one I was. The room was tense, thick with the heat of unspoken pride and unmasked cruelty. My relatives sat with smug faces, their words still lingering like smoke after a fire. I sat silent, gripping the ticket, my palms sweaty, my eyes fixed on the ground. Then Grandpa spoke again. His voice was low, steady, and sharp enough to cut through the air. "You sit here, mocking him for carrying hope. But I wonder, who among you has the courage to carry hope at all?" His question landed heavily. No one moved. No one spoke. They were waiting, but they didn't know for what. Grandpa leaned forward in his chair, his old hands gripping his cane. "Michael, you call him a dreamer as if that's an insult. But what have you built without a dream? You spent 10 years chasing a promotion that never came, and when it didn't, you blamed everyone but yourself. Ellen, you scoff at his risks, but I remember when you borrowed money for a business that failed within 6 months. Did we laugh at you? No, we helped you back up. And you," his eyes swept toward another cousin, "you laugh the loudest. Yet you've changed jobs 3 times in 5 years, never satisfied, always chasing something better. Isn't that the same hope you're mocking him for?" Each word was a mirror, reflecting their own failures back at them. I saw it in their faces, the twitch of shame, the shift of eyes, the silent swallow when truth hits too close. But Grandpa wasn't done. His voice grew stronger, filled with the power of conviction. "This ticket may be nothing but paper, yes, but do you know what makes it different? It's not the ink. It's not the prize. It's the belief behind it. And belief is something none of you seem to have anymore. You've replaced it with bitterness. You've traded it for arrogance. And now you tear at the one man here who refuses to let his spirit die." I lifted my head then, slowly, meeting their eyes for the first time since the storm of insults began. My hands were still shaking, but inside me, something began to steady. Grandpa's words were building a fire in me, a fire I thought had been extinguished under their laughter. Michael tried to scoff, but it rang hollow. "So what? He's still going to lose. That ticket won't change a thing." Grandpa's reply was immediate. "Even if it doesn't, he will have something you've lost. Courage. The courage to try. And sometimes, courage is what changes everything." The silence that followed was heavier than all the laughter before it. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the silence of being exposed. They shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact, their smirks replaced with tight lips. For once, they didn't have a clever comeback, and in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't just Grandpa's fight. It was mine. His words had opened the door, but I had to walk through it. I took a deep breath and finally spoke, my voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. "You've mocked me for years. You've called me a fool, a failure, a dreamer. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've stumbled more than most. But at least I'm not afraid to stand back up. At least I'm not afraid to believe that tomorrow can look different from today. That ticket in my hand isn't a guarantee, but it's a symbol. A symbol that I won't let your laughter define me." My words seemed to hang in the air, clashing with the walls of pride that surrounded me. And for the first time I saw something flicker in their eyes. Not respect, not yet, but recognition. Recognition that I wasn't broken, that I was still standing. Grandpa nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. His voice softened, but it carried weight. "There it is. That's the voice I knew was in you all along. The plan for revenge wasn't about shouting louder. It wasn't about proving them wrong in that moment. It was about planting something deeper, a truth they couldn't unhear, a defiance they couldn't erase, and a strength they couldn't crush. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire. Sometimes it comes with the quiet, steady refusal to bow. And in that living room, surrounded by the people who wanted me small, that refusal was the start of something they never expected. The room was still. You could almost hear the faint tick of the old clock on the wall, each second dragging heavier than the last. The laughter that had once filled the air was gone, replaced by an uneasy quiet that settled over everyone like a suffocating blanket. Grandpa shifted in his chair, slowly straightening his back. His voice, though older and worn, carried a kind of power that made every ear lean in, whether they wanted to or not. "I've lived long enough to know one thing," he began, his eyes sweeping across every face in the room. "A man's worth isn't measured by the number of times he falls, but by the number of times he rises again." He let the words hang, heavy, before leaning forward. "And right now, the only one rising in this room is the very man you've mocked. The rest of you? You've chosen to sit in your pride, in your bitterness, and in your fear. You laugh at his ticket because it reminds you of your own abandoned dreams." A ripple went through the room, the kind of silence that isn't empty but loaded, like a storm waiting to break. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Ellen crossed her arms tighter, though her eyes darted away. A cousin bit their lip. It was clear. Grandpa's words were cutting deeper than any of them would admit. He pointed his cane lightly toward me. "He may lose the ticket. He may win nothing. But at least he has something none of you do. The courage to hope, the courage to try, the courage to keep standing when the world tells him to sit down." And then his voice sharpened, slicing the room with the precision of truth. "So laugh if you must. But remember this. One day, when your pride has eaten away at what little joy you cling to, you'll think back to this moment. And you'll remember that the man you mocked was the one who carried more strength than all of you combined. The words fell like thunder, the kind of thunder that doesn't just shake the air but rattles the bones. No one spoke. No one dared. For the first time that night, I looked around the room and saw their faces differently. The smirks were gone. The smugness was gone. All that remained was the faint shadow of shame, of recognition, of cracks in the armor they had built around themselves. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, his hands resting firmly on his cane. His work was done. He had spoken truth so sharp, so undeniable that it silenced the loudest of critics. I felt something rise in me then. Not just relief, not just gratitude, but strength. Strength I didn't know I had until that very moment. I realized that my revenge wasn't about shouting back, or proving them wrong with money, or waving success in their faces. My revenge was already happening. It was standing tall when they expected me to bow. Grandpa's words had shattered them, and in that silence, I felt free. The silence stretched on, heavy and unrelenting. It was the kind of silence that presses down on you, demanding that you sit with yourself, with your thoughts, with the truth you've tried so hard to ignore. I sat there, holding the ticket loosely in my hand, my breathing steady now, my heart calmer than it had been all night. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in their laughter. I wasn't shrinking under their judgment. I was standing tall, even while sitting. Ellen shifted in her seat, her eyes flicking toward me and then away, like she couldn't quite bear the weight of what had been said. Michael leaned back, his jaw tight, his fingers drumming restlessly on the arm of his chair, a man searching for a defense that no longer existed. And the cousins, once so quick to mock, sat stone-faced, their smirks erased, their bravado deflated. It was Grandpa's voice that lingered, echoing in every corner of the room. The man you mocked was the one who carried more strength than all of you combined. I glanced at him. He was calm now, his shoulders eased, his cane resting gently by his side. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw not just protection in them but pride. Quiet, unspoken pride. In that moment I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it doesn't need to. Sometimes it simply stands in truth and lets the weight of that truth do the work. And that's exactly what had happened. My family had laughed. They had mocked. They had tried to strip me of dignity. But in the end, it wasn't me who was left small. It was them, exposed by their own cruelty, left facing the hollowness of their pride. I stood, sliding the ticket into my pocket. "I don't need you to believe in me," I said softly but firmly. "I believe in myself. And sometimes that's more than enough." No one answered. No one dared. As I walked toward the door, I felt lighter than I had in years. Their laughter no longer chained me. Their judgment no longer defined me. And Grandpa's words had given me something they could never take away, the strength to keep standing no matter how many times I stumbled. I paused at the doorway and looked back once more. "You may never understand it," I said, "but one day you'll remember this moment, and maybe then you'll see the truth." And with that, I stepped out, the quiet behind me louder than any laughter they could have thrown. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the weight of their laughter no longer clung to me. Instead, I carried something different, a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need applause or recognition. That night, I learned something I'll never forget. Betrayal hurts deepest when it comes from the ones who share your blood. Their laughter cuts sharper than any stranger's words ever could. But sometimes, betrayal is the fire that forges you. Sometimes, it is the very thing that forces you to rise higher than you ever thought you could. Grandpa's words echoed in my heart long after I left. A man's worth isn't measured by the number of times he falls, but by the number of times he rises again. And isn't that the truth for all of us? Every one of us carries a dream, a hope, a fragile spark that the world tries to smother with doubt and ridicule. Sometimes, even our closest circle tries to put out that flame, not because they hate us, but because our courage reminds them of what they've lost. The lesson is this: never hand your worth to the laughter of others. Never let their disbelief become your definition. Your dream is yours. Your hope is yours. And no one, not even family, has the right to take that from you. Revenge doesn't always mean payback in the way people expect. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is living with resilience, with courage, with dignity, showing those who doubted you that their laughter did not break you, and it never will. So, if you've ever been laughed at, mocked, or told you'll never make it, remember this story. Remember the man with the ticket and the grandfather whose words shattered the room. And remember that your story isn't written by their doubts. It's written by your persistence. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how many times you fall. What matters is that you rise. Again and again and again. And when you rise, the same voices that once laughed will be the ones left in silence.